Another day, another dollar. You might not think money is something to sing and dance about, but don't worry, that's why I'm here. I'm Julie Beckham, the financial educator at Rockland Trust, and this is Behind the Curtain, Money Made Simple, the podcast that takes the mystery out of money and puts the spotlight on your financial life. If you've ever felt behind, confused, or just totally overwhelmed when it comes to your finances, you are not alone. In fact, you're part of a cast of thousands. So take your seat and silence your phones as we pull back the curtain on personal finance. Welcome, everyone, to Behind the Curtain, Money Made Simple. My name is Julie Beckham, and I'm really excited to have kind of one of the toughest conversations about money that one can have with their parents and then eventually their children. And I'm here to welcome Cameron Huddleston. Welcome, Cameron.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Cameron, just so our listeners know, Cameron Huddleston is an award-winning journalist who's been writing about personal finance in all the places for the last 20 years or so. We're talking, the Kiplinger's to the Huffington Post, all the places. And she recently, not too recently, a couple of years ago, wrote this book, Mom and Dad, We Need to Talk. And the subtitle is How to Have Essential Conversations with Your Parents About Their Finances. Now, if you haven't shivered or run away yet, stay tuned because Cameron has some real experience with this. And I'm excited to kind of find out why you wrote this book.
So I wrote the book because, plot twist, I did not have these conversations with my parents soon enough. I eventually had the conversation with my mom, but it was not an ideal situation. What happened was when I was 28 and my dad was 61, he died of a heart attack, and it was a big shock to all of us. What was even more of a shock was that he died without a will or a trust. And the reason it was a shock is because my dad was an attorney. He was in a second marriage, and his second wife was actually an attorney also. So this is what you do for a living. You advise people about what legal documents you need to have in place, and he didn't have the most essential legal documents himself. What was even more interesting is that after my parents got divorced, my mom had been telling me, you need to have a conversation with your dad to find out what his wishes are. And I was like, what? I'm in my 20s. Why do I need to have this conversation? It wasn't something it wasn't a conversation that I was eager to have with him. And so I did not have that conversation with him in time. And then a couple years after my father's death, my mom started showing signs of memory loss. But I had not had any detailed conversations with her about her finances. And so I was having to play detective to get the information I needed as she was forgetting details about her finances. And if I had simply had conversations, I would have had the information I needed. I wouldn't have had to, dig through her files and look at her tax returns and go through her mail. We could have done such a better job of having a plan if we had simply had some conversations. And I realized that I needed to share this information with other people. Actually, while I was being interviewed for a podcast, it was the Experian podcast, and we were talking about an article I'd written about managing my mom's finances. And both of the hosts said, I should probably have this conversation with my parents. The tech who was recording the podcast stopped me afterward and said, I should be having this conversation. There were a couple of other people in the room who all said the same thing. And I thought, this is a book. I need to help people have these conversations.
And it's so interesting. First of all, I'm sorry. That's a lot to deal with. I mean, we all have to deal with these kind of things, but it's a pretty young age to deal with some hefty emotional things as well as digging into these financial topics. But you had the advantage of at least knowing what you were doing because you have been writing about personal finance for so long. For most people, these terms like power of attorney, even wills and trusts, what's the difference and why do I need it? And then an estate planner, who is that and why do they charge so much money? And do I need that? And can I do it online? How can you imagine this to be different, if you didn't have that background? Or is that what this book addresses?
Well, I certainly walk through, I walk people through everything they need to know when having these conversations. There's a chapter on estate planning. What is a will? What is a power of attorney? What's a healthcare power of attorney? What's a living will? I explain it in very simple terms. There's a chapter on long-term care planning and how to have that conversation with your parents. There's a chapter on talking to your parents about scams. Actually, I start the book by telling people you need to talk to your siblings before you even talk to your parents, because you and your siblings need to get on the same page, because a lot of fights erupt between brothers and sisters over who's going to have the conversation, who's going to get involved. I mean, sometimes the conversations with siblings can be more difficult than the conversations with parents. And you're right. Most of us have no idea what these things are. We have no idea that we even need to have this conversation. It's hard enough for us to manage our own finances. Imagine going to your parents and saying, hey, I want to talk to you about your finances. And your parents are going to look at you and say, are you kidding? Who are you, my child, to talk to me about my finances?
Because
huge role reversal.
Exactly. And they're like, I taught you how to use a fork. Get out of my business, And so there's so much of that, right?
Exactly. It's awkward. It's difficult. It's confusing all the way around. And so I think the first step you need to do is honestly realize there's a lot you probably don't know. And so you need to do some research. Even if you're good with money, you need to do some research before you have these conversations with your parents. Do a Google search, how to talk to mom and dad about their finances. You'll probably find my book, or you probably find some interviews that I've done. So listen to podcasts, read some articles so that you feel comfortable even knowing what to discuss when having these conversations.
And I think, I do that. I mean, this book it's chapter by chapter outlining certain steps to take, kind of giving you that courage to gather the siblings, take the next step. But I follow the work that you do when you're writing about personal finance, whether it's in AARP or Huffington Post or all these places where you're asked to comment on things. And it feels like you're really walking the walk when it comes to owning this vulnerability of talking about money, not only with your parents or with your mom through that situation, but also with your children. Can you speak a little bit about that experience?
Sure. So I have 3 kids, and my oldest children are now 21 and 19, both young women. I was about to say girls, but they're young women at this point. And so when they were both home from college during the winter, my husband and I sat them down and had this conversation with them. I mean, we did it on a Friday night too.
Friday finances at the Huddlestons.
Yes. Yeah. Can you imagine how fun that is?
I hope you got pizza.
Let's talk about what's going to happen when we die, if we need long-term care. It's not a fun conversation to have at any time, especially not on a Friday night. And so we warned them that, we wanted to sit down and talk to them. My husband and I had to do some prep work beforehand. I made a list. Actually, I have a little book that has all of our financial information in it. And so even though we were telling them this information, we wanted to have something in writing for them so that they could refer to it. I mean, they're not going to remember everything we tell them. My middle child was taking notes, even though I told her, look, this is in writing, but she's still taking notes. She's that type of student. And so it wasn't horrible. Like, talking about, talking to your kids about when you're going to die, because I mean, we are all going to die, and talking about it does not hasten your death. Creating estate planning documents does not increase the risk that you are going to die. And I've had plenty of attorneys say that they have clients who come to them and say, I don't want to do this because if I do it, that just means I'm going to die. No, it doesn't. My husband and I have written and rewritten our wills 3 times. We're still alive. Okay. We've had to update it. And so that was one of the reasons that we wanted to have that conversation with our kids, is because we had updated our will to name our 2 adult daughters as our alternate executor. Executor is the person or people who are going to manage your estate when you die. An estate is just a fancy word for everything you have, all your assets, all your property. And even if you don't have a lot,
you still have stuff.
You still have stuff.
Yeah.
And if you don't put it in writing, whether that's in a will or a trust, then state law is going to determine who gets your stuff. And maybe, you're in a second marriage but you want to make sure that your kids get some of your stuff because your second wife still survives you. Well, guess what? They're not. It's going to, it depends on the type of state you live in. But, when my father died, everything went to my stepmom. Everything, because he didn't have a will. So you need to put it in writing, who gets what, and you need to name someone, an executor, who's going to manage things when you die, who's going to make sure any debts that you have are getting paid, who's going to distribute all of the property, all of the assets that you have. And so my husband and I are each other's primary executor. The kids are secondary. So, we wanted to let them know, look, we've assigned you this role, and because we've done this, you need to know the details about our finances. It's like you wouldn't hand your kids the car keys without teaching them to drive first. So you don't want to assign these roles to them without telling them what they're expected to do and giving them the information they need to step into those roles. We also name them our secondary power of attorney. Power of attorney, it sounds fancy. You don't have to be an attorney to be named someone's agent under power of attorney. You just pick someone you trust. And it's got to be someone you really trust and can count on to manage your finances for you if you cannot, for whatever reason. If you have a stroke, if you have dementia, even if you're out of the country temporarily, and you're not at home to sign some sort of real estate document. We name them our secondary healthcare power of attorney. That means they get to make medical decisions for us if we're unable to ourselves. We explained what our living will states, that we don't want to be kept on life support, And so we gave them all of this information. We told them our long-term care plans. We explained that we are in the fortunate position to have money to pay for professional care if we need it. I do not expect, nor do I want my children to have to take care of me if I end up in a situation like my mother did. Now, that does not mean that I want them to abandon me. I told them, look, you're going to make sure that I am in a nice facility. You're going to make sure that the bills are getting paid. I would like for you to handle that part, but I don't expect you to put your life on hold to care for me. That's my personal decision, but I wanted my kids to know it, and so we gave them all of this information because you never know what could happen. My dad died at 61. My mom was 65 when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Just before we had this conversation, a high school classmate of mine, his wife died in her sleep. She was 52. I am 52 now. Like, you just don't know, and you need to be prepared. And it doesn't mean you're giving up control when you're having these conversations. It's the opposite. You're maintaining control because you're letting your kids know your wishes. You're letting them know how you want your finances managed if you can't. If you don't give your kids this information, who knows what they're going to do? They're going to make decisions that you might not agree with. They don't know what accounts you have. Those accounts might, get lost in the shuffle. You've got to share this information.
Right. And it's peace of mind too, because saying your wishes, like, I don't want you to stop your life to take care of me if I am not able to take care of myself. Saying that as a healthy 52-year-old and hearing that, like rehearing that seeing it in paper, 20, 30, hopefully longer, years from now, when your children are grown and they say, this is what mom would have wanted, so, and they know that the siblings can look at each other and say, it's in writing. We had this conversation. And I mean, that's worth so much, just peace of mind. I think that so much of this planning creates peace of mind, but so much of the work that goes into the planning can create so much stress. Just the thought of not having a manuscript kind of thing, which you provide here. So that's why it's so, this book is so revealing. It provides this manuscript so you can have these conversations, but also, with everything, the world is uncertain. So this seems like something we should do. Yet it feels like so many of us are really just like paycheck to paycheck, trying to make everything work. As parents, perhaps, you're getting off the daycare payment, but then you have the college payment and all this stuff. And you're like, oh gosh, this is going to cost me $5,000-$10,000 to hire an attorney. Are there any things that you can speak to as far as that's concerned that can kind of ease that stress?
On average, if you want to get that full estate plan, again, just a fancy term for these legal documents, it could cost you $1,000 to $2,000, maybe $3,000 for a will. If you're going to get a trust, that's going to cost you more. There's a lot more entailed to getting a trust. And a trust, just to explain the difference between a will and a trust briefly, the biggest difference is that with a trust, you can bypass what is called probate. And that is essentially the legal process when you die of distributing your assets. You're going to go before a judge and present all the assets that the estate had, and they're going to figure out what debts are owed and who's supposed to be getting what. And in some states, California, for example, that can be very expensive, that probate process. I'm in Kentucky. Probate is not an expensive process. It's not a difficult process, which is why my husband and I opted only to have a will rather than a trust, because setting up a trust can be more expensive. And so, you can get that will, you get the power of attorney to name someone to make financial decisions for you, the healthcare power of attorney, the living will or advance directive that lets you spell out your end of life medical wishes. Do you want to be on life support? Do you not? Okay. Like I said, that's $1,000, $2,000, maybe $3,000 in most parts of the country. Now, that is still a lot for a lot of people. So there are some cheaper alternatives. There are some online companies that offer wills and trust. You could look into using one of those. You can actually find free living will and healthcare power of attorney documents. And those are good. Like for your doctor might even offer that. But that one document that I would recommend meeting with an attorney to draft, and you want to go to an estate planning attorney or an elder law attorney, get an attorney to help you with that power of attorney document. Because if you use a generic one, it might not conform to the laws of your state. There are lots of different types of power of attorney, so you want to make sure you're getting the right one for you and for your situation. And the other benefit of having an attorney do it is sometimes the person you named as your agent, when it comes time to act on your behalf and they have to go to the bank or the credit union or to the brokerage and say, I'm mom's power of attorney, they've got to show that document. Sometimes financial institutions can say, wait a second. The account holder should have signed some documents that we have beforehand. They might question whether it's really valid. And so if you've worked with an attorney, you can always reach out to that attorney and say, hey, listen, I need you to get on the phone with the bank and let them know that this is a valid power of attorney document. They're kind of there in your corner for you to help you out if you run into any issues. And so that would be the one document that I would say it's 100% worth paying to have an attorney draft. Other options you might want to consider if you can't afford having all of those documents drafted by attorney, to use an online option. Your workplace might offer, as part of its benefits, access to an attorney who can draft those documents for you. Your workplace might offer you access to a financial planner that you can pay by the hour to look at what assets you have and help you perhaps come up with a plan for how you would pay for long-term care if you need it, or who can coach you in how to have these conversations with your kids or your parents.
That's a great resource. A lot of employees do that. A lot of unions do that. At Rockland, there are trusted resources. It's just sometimes it's about making that first call, having that first meeting, and kind of dusting those cobwebs and those nerves off. But I just think that the story about your dad being an attorney and not having those things in place is just so enlightening, because it shows that our lives are complicated, and we focus on our careers and the things that we have to do for our jobs, and we focus on our families. And sometimes those worlds do not intertwine, and we don't carry those skills and things over, or we're just human and we really think that that's not going to happen to us. Even death, right? We all know death and dying. There's no way out. There's no way out except dying. Yet we're like, oh, okay, we'll do that tomorrow. And we don't know what tomorrow brings. And it's just so interesting. I love that you're talking to your kids about this. And I also think you're normalizing personal finance and so many other conversations with your kids. And I read an article about it that you said was one of your most popular articles about having the financial talk with your college graduate and how to manage, kind of leaving the nest and what that looks like. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I was surprised how much traction that article got. It was something that I wrote for my personal newsletter, and I wrote about, whether you should continue to support your adult children, because a lot of parents do, and a lot of parents spend a lot of money continuing to support their adult children after they've graduated from college. I mean, some people are doing it even when their kids have jobs. And every family is different, but it's so important to remember that as much as we love our children, our financial well-being has to take priority. You cannot jeopardize, for example, your own retirement savings to support adult children who are capable of supporting themselves. They might be having trouble finding a job out of college. My daughter graduated in the spring. She has yet to find what I'm going to say, a real job. She's got a part-time job, but that's the thing. She has a part-time job. She's capable of working and bringing in an income until she finds the job she really wants, and so your kids might not be able to find that job they really want, but there are jobs out there. And if you're supporting them 100% and you're doing it to the detriment of your own retirement savings, you're putting those savings on hold, or you're not paying credit card bills, or you're only paying the minimum, what you're doing is perpetuating this cycle. As you get older and you want to retire, you might not be able to afford to, or you might retire and only have Social Security. And then when emergency strikes, you're reaching out to your kids for financial support, and then that's going to put financial strain on them. If you need long-term care, you have no way to pay for professional care. You're expecting your kids to stop working to care for you because it can be a full-time job. Then their finances are going to be jeopardized, and that might impact their children if they have any. And so, you want to focus on saving for your future, and sometimes having those tough conversations with your kids. Look, this is all I can do. You want to move back home? Okay, I can let you move back home, but it doesn't mean that you get to sit around and watch Netflix all day. You're going to find a job, and maybe it's not the job you really want, but you're going to start earning some money, setting it aside so that when you get the job that you really want, you have some savings to move into an apartment, or you're going to pitch in, you're going to help pay for the groceries. You're going to pay for your cell phone bill, so my husband and I, did continue to provide some support for our daughter. But like I said, she was making enough money to pay for her groceries, to pay for her gas. Now that part-time job, she got a promotion. She's a shift leader. She can cover all of her costs, and so, we let her know, like, this is how long we will continue to provide support for you. But at a certain point, you're going to have to figure out how to cover all your costs on your own. It's not indefinite. And so, it doesn't mean that you don't love your kids if you're not willing to support them indefinitely. It means, you've got to make some choices. And, your kids aren't going to want to have to quit their jobs down the road to help support you, or they're not going to want to have to donate half of their pay to help support you in retirement. And I'm sure no parents want that either. But, like I said, sometimes it takes some tough choices and some tough conversations.
As parents, we tend to overcompensate. And in this particular way, it could be really detrimental and dangerous to your future to overcompensate financially. And a little bit psychologically, I think, for lack of a better term, messing up kind of what that young adult feels confident in achieving and being able to accomplish on their own. Do you agree?
I agree. I think there are ways to set your kids up for success and financial independence without supporting them fully financially. Teaching your kids how to budget. This is how much money you have, so this is what you can afford. No, you cannot afford that really nice one-bedroom apartment. You might have to settle for a studio apartment, in a building that doesn't have a swimming pool,
right,
or whatever. You might have to stop. You might have to stop, subscribing to streaming services. You might have to get the cheapest phone plan. You might have to, you might not be able to have a car. You might just have to rely on public transportation. Helping them create that budget, helping them learn how to manage their money better, showing them how to use the grocery store app so they can clip coupons digitally so that they can save money when they're buying food, telling them, look, you don't get to go out every weekend. Sometimes you have to make compromises and sacrifices, and this is the way things are. And it's tough, but it will pay off down the road.
Yeah. And it's sometimes a product too of us as parents kind of hiding these struggles from them as they grew up to create this illusion, I don't want to get stressed out the family about this person losing their job or us having to tighten the budget or anything. So you just don't talk about it. And then when they're kind of unaware that these money struggles exist until they're stepping into their adulthood and they're like, wait a second, you mean you only buy this when it's on sale? Wait, those kind of things. So I think, talking to kids about money and talking to your adult children, talking to your parents, it's all so important, yet it's just difficult. Speaking of difficult, there's so many financial ages, where we're in different stages of our financial lives. Because you write about all of these issues, is there one that you particularly find the most hard, challenging?
I think it's all difficult. I hate saying that.
No, I think you're right. I wish I was actually asking, so I was like, maybe I already got through.
I know
the difficult part.
No, I don't know if it ever gets easy, but I really do believe that being open about money, having open, honest discussions makes it easier. If you are in a relationship, it is so important to have open conversations with your partner about finances, because it will help lessen money fights. Talking to your children from an early age and teaching them about money is going to help them be better prepared, and they're going to be less likely to have to rely on you for support. Having conversations with your parents while they are still relatively young and healthy will help you all get on the same page, create a plan, and so that when those emergencies strike and they will 100%, you know what to do. And so being open, planning definitely makes it easier.
Yeah. And I think too, like I'm thinking about as you're talking, like the conversations I've had, I just joked like Friday night, Friday finances at the Huddlestons. Like I've tried that with my partner, like, Monday money, like, all this, like, let's talk about these things, these serious topics. And it's like, oh gosh, Julie, right now, yeah, like we have to talk about this, or, even talking with my siblings and getting together with my parents. And I mean, I have to say we've struck out a bunch of times. It's going to take a couple of turns. This is not, stepping up to bat and hitting a home run. So I think based on what you've written and my experience, it's like, try again. So you kind of have to knock at the door a couple of times. And I made a joke yesterday because I was talking to my mom and I was like, oh, this is in my bag. Like I'm having this podcast recording and, like the next part will be like leaving it on the kitchen table, these kind of things to say like, hey, like these are the important conversations that we need to have. But however you can do it, if you can do it with humor, if you can do it by sitting down and reading a book, sending a podcast, having a nice lunch or just coffee or going over for tea and just saying like, hey, like I listened to this podcast. I don't know how to have this conversation, but I want to learn how. Could you think you'd be up for doing this with us or even with the siblings? I think there has to be a multitude of approaches with this because every family dynamic is different. But at least starting it, I think, is so important. And I just love the idea that you're starting it with your emerging adults, as you probably call them.
Emerging adults. Yeah. I'm so glad, though, that you brought up that point because it is true. This is not one conversation. It's a series of conversations, and it can take time. And that's why I encourage people to start sooner rather than later, because for some people, it can honestly take years.
Yeah, and time is not on your side in this situation.
No, to get parents to start opening up. Like I have a friend, she is a financial planner. And for years, she was trying to get her mom to share just even whether she had any estate planning documents. Finally, her mom said, yes, I have these estate planning documents and here's where they are.
So conversations are hard, but they are worth it in the long run. I appreciate you for having this conversation with us today because it is so important. And Cameron's book is Mom, Dad, We Need to Talk, How to Have Essential Conversations with Your Parents About Their Finances. And Cameron, can you we're going to get some rapid fire questions in a minute, but can you just also tell us where to follow you?
Sure. So you can check out my website, which is CameronHuddleston.com. And I do have a couple of free resources there. Like if you just click on resources, there's this downloadable in case of emergency organizer that you could print out and use for yourself to record all your information about your finances, give it to your parents and just say, look, you don't have to tell me anything. Just like put it here in this list and tell me where I can find it in case there's an emergency. There is a scam red flag sheet. Again, this is something you could print out, give to your parents as a conversation starter. I mean, any of us could be targeted by scammers, so it's kind of an easy in. I think where I'm most active on social media is Instagram, so it's Cameron K. Huddleston on Instagram.
Okay, awesome. No, thank you. Those downloadable resources are really great. And I appreciate you bringing up scams because, it's interesting. Statistically, 18 to 24-year-olds are scammed more often, but seniors are scammed for more money because they've worked their lifetime accumulating this money. So, we have at Rockland Trust, we have Spot the Scam videos, but you can't get enough of this information. So printed material is great to leave places, sending a Spot the Scam video, having a conversation. Again, not to say like, hey, mom, dad, you're vulnerable. Like that feels bad, but to say like, hey, I saw this. Have you heard of this? And really equalizing that conversation can really help and keep away that danger. So thank you so much. Okay, we're going to do our curtain call rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Maybe.
Okay, I know. Okay, don't worry. No super pressure. There's no clock. I call it rapid fire, but maybe that's just the title. Okay. What is your favorite word?
I don't know if I have a favorite word. It's so funny because my kids have all these words that they hate when we use them.
Like what?
Like my oldest daughter, she hates the word snack. Like if you say you're snacking.
So what is your least favorite word now that we know your daughter's least favorite word?
My least favorite word, because I'm using it right now, is and because I use that when I speak.
Oh,
and it's,
yeah.
And it's funny because I just heard something on the radio about that, about how often we use as a filler. And so that's something I'm trying to work to correct, is to stop using and
It's hard. It's hard. Oh, but that's self-awareness. Oh, okay. If your life had a theme song or like a walk-up song when you went to bat, what would it be?
One of my favorite songs is Ramble On by Led Zeppelin, which certainly feels like what I'm doing right now, just rambling on.
Good one. Good one. All right, this might be easier. What's your most used emoji?
The thumbs up emoji.
Oh, wow. Okay, good one. What gets you motivated to do the work you do?
My own experience. I just don't want people to end up in a situation like I did.
What keeps you from doing your work?
Being tired.
That's a good answer. What is money advice you wish you could erase from your memory? Some bad advice you got along the way?
I mean, I can certainly think of money advice that my parents failed to give me. Start saving for retirement early. Okay. Again, something my parents never talked to me about. There were no conversations about saving in my household when I was growing up. And I never got that lesson on the earlier you start setting money aside, the easier it is to accumulate enough savings thanks to that power of compounding.
Yes, the eighth wonder of the world. It really is. Nobody, if people explain that to teenagers, the as powerfully as it actually is, everyone's jaw would drop. Lastly, give our listeners, I feel like this is a challenging conversation in general, but I want you to give our listeners a challenge, like something they could do today that could change their financial lives.
Here's a challenge. Make a list, and if you're married or in a relationship, sit down with your partner and make a list of what your priorities are, what you value. Maybe your priority is to retire by the age of 50. I don't know. You make that list. And then what you're going to do is look at your spending and see if your spending is aligning with your priorities. Are you spending a lot of your money on going out to dinner, but really you want to retire at 50? Well, maybe you put more money towards your retirement savings, And so when you think of it that way, about not how to restrict yourself, but is my money going where I want it to go? It makes budgeting a lot easier.
I love that challenge. I feel like the grumpiest I've ever been is when my spending is not aligned with my priorities, and you don't recognize it until you make those connections. And it can cause all sorts of fights, arguments within a family's relationship when those things don't align. That's wonderful. Thank you, Cameron. This has been such a great conversation. And I just love, I think that people are so effective when their job is based on their personal experience. And it feels like, you're a journalist. You ended up being a financial journalist. You've learned all these things. You've obviously gone through some really traumatic, hard times with your parents and their aging and their death. And you were able to take that experience and that expertise and help other people, which I think that's our point, right? Here on this earth, is to use what we know to help other people. And I think that it's wonderful that you've done that. So if you need to have these conversations, definitely check out Cameron's book or subscribe to her newsletter and follow her on social media. Thank you so much, Cameron.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Behind the Curtain, Money Made Simple. If you liked what you heard, if you learned something, subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend, because good financial education deserves a standing ovation. And remember, you don't have to know all the steps before you take the stage. You just need the courage to show up, ask questions, and maybe, just maybe, sing a little bit along the way. I'm Julie Beckham, and Behind the Curtain, Money Made Simple is brought to you by Rockland Trust, member FDIC. The bank where each relationship matters, because we want you to have a healthy relationship with money at any age.